The next speaker is Mr. Daniel Rogger, Research Manager, Governance and Institution Building, Development Impact Department of the World Bank. And I see he is ready to speak. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. I'll provide some comments from an initiative on public sector workforce issues from the World Bank that we've nicknamed the Bureaucracy Lab. Our intention, like so many of us here, is to better understand the question, how do you improve the functioning of government? And our answer is rooted in measurement, diagnostics, experimentation with government and administration in a way that's sort of similar to a doctor trying to better understand and support a patient. So I'm going to show you a few slides, if they can be brought up. And I'm going to showcase a few ideas of the way we think through themes in the expert paper that really try to equip these bureaucratic hackers, as was framed, with a few tools. So I'm going to start with the question, so next slide please, of how do we decide the pay of public sector workforce? So the public sector workforce is a huge part of the economy, and workforce policies and such as pay policies impact the entire economy. By setting the opportunity of earning a particular wage in the public sector, pay policy changes what happens in the private sector. And so when we think about public sector workforce, we're actually thinking about the economy as a whole. One way to see this, next slide please, is to study what's called the public sector wage premium, which is the difference between what a person with certain characteristics would be paid if they were to work on similar tasks in the public and private sectors. And what you see here is a graph. It's a representative selection of wage premia across countries from the Bureaucracy Lab's worldwide bureaucracy indicators. And what's amazing is you look at that and you immediately see that the wage premium's positive everywhere. It doesn't sometimes feel like that in the narrative, but in the data that's what we find. But, next slide please, if I overlay wage premia for particular groups such as men and women, we see that there are in fact very different wage premia across different groups within the public service. And next slide please, if we look across different education levels, we see that the variation in a single country in this very important phenomenon, wage premium, is as large in a country as it is across countries. And so this means that different labor markets for these different groups are being impacted very differently by wage policies in the public sector. What does this mean? It means that the way we think is that designing wage policies in an optimal way means being informed by these numbers and numbers like them for a very particular setting, a particular group. Next slide. Pay that attracts talent but doesn't overly distort private markets requires data and analysis about each group of the public workforce. Well, the UN has helped countries collect that for years in household surveys. So that's tool one for bureaucratic hackers. Second, next slide please. We often think to ourselves, well, what about when you get inside the public service? The experience of government varies tremendously for public employees themselves. Next slide. This is illustrated here by how much management varies across organizations, these solid dots. But also, next slide, we measure inside organizations across units and departments. And what you see again is that this is Ghana's civil service. The way that people are treated, the way that they're managed varies tremendously, not just across organizations, but from one office to another. Some organizations are nurturing and supporting their public service, and others are holding them back. Given how much we know management matters to individual productivity, these graph, next slide please, which we now see across the world, we have data on management across organizations from many public services, it implies huge potential gains from changing something that's well within our grasp, which is measuring management and then helping managers do it better, a little bit like the gentleman was saying at the very beginning. And then thirdly, one last example, next slide, and next slide again. The advent of digital information management systems for much of government work means that we now have a powerful window into the diversity of productivity of the public service. So I've outlined diversity in wage premia and management, but the diversity we have in productivity data is quite extraordinary. Next slide. What you're going to see here is productivity data from Slovakia. And this is very standard local government processing of business licenses, next slide, and also environmental processing of licenses. Now, the orange dots you now see are those organizational differences, but what you see, the blue dots, are differences in individual productivity. What does that mean? It means that individuals sitting next to each other, literally cheek by jowl, can be orders of magnitude less or more productive than each other. And it's in the data that we now collect in digital systems. That means everything we need to transform the public sector's workforce productivity is already there. In fact, the person next to the unproductive official might be the person who can mentor, support, and change their capabilities. What ties all of the variation I'm showing you in these slides together is the need to collect data from all areas of government at this very discrete level. And we can do it. We've actually already done a lot of the work. The public service is extraordinarily rich in terms of the data it collects as a routine byproduct of its administration and audit functions. And the World Bank's activities have increasingly moved to what we call government analytics. Next slide, please. You see, what we think is typically lacking is the repurposing of the data that government already has to understand the functioning of government. Next slide, please. You see, good government analytics takes sound methods and people who can apply those methods. So we've developed a government analytics handbook, and this summer we'll welcome the first government analytics fellows to Washington. Our hope is to change the way government sees itself, not the way that the bank or others see it. And so within the last year, we've actually been working with the UN's Group of Friends initiative, our coalition that partners with UNDP and UNDESA, to apply our joint experience and convening power to undertake these sorts of better diagnostics and experimental action. We believe it's time to capitalize on the richness of the public sector's data and its existing talented analysts just by helping that little bit more. So like the bureaucracy scientists we say we are unclear what the future of administration and government workforce holds, but we hope to build a stronger body of self-reflection inside government. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting, and